There's no evidence, I suggest, from the government that would rebut the fact that there is evidence of lack of criminal responsibilities.
Lindsay Clancy's defense starting off strong.
She was begging for help.
Did she get any help from the suicide hotline?
She was turned away. She was not faking. There was no evidence of any malingering.
And the cross-exam gets intense.
Now, are you an active member in the Catholic Church?
Yes.
So you're aware that murder is considered a mortal sin?
Counsel, could I see you over here?
Plus a look at Lindsay's life since the death of her children.
Lindsay Clancy has bad days and worse days.
This is Scandal, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Gillespe. After weeks of testimony from Commonwealth witnesses, Lindsay Clancy's defense begins its case in chief. That means we heard from those closest to Lindsay, her own family, for the first time.
She said, this isn't me. I just want to feel better and enjoy my kids again.
I had this gut feeling that something was off and that she was really struggling.
I'd argue another major witness for the defense was from the other side of the family. Lindsay's former mother-in-law, Patrick Clancy's own mother, testifying for the defense.
She loved her children, all of them, very, very much.
There's also been expert testimony touching on Lindsay's mental health status.
She had said that she heard a male voice ordering her, telling her that she didn't have any choice, but she had to kill her children and then kill herself.
But we can't talk about these witnesses without highlighting some tense moments from cross-exam.
You keep saying you're sure there were bruises, that you're sure that there was this or that that's not shown in any photographs or medical evidence. So you're not sure, are you? You're assuming.
No, I'm sure.
Did she tell you that she had consumed a weed gummy before going to the ER that day?
She did not.
Okay. And in your experience as a nurse, is that sometimes a reaction to THC or CBD or some sort of weed, that somebody might have a faster heartbeat?
I don't know.
So let's get into it. The most influential defense witnesses we've seen so far at the time of this recording. Now, just this week, Lindsay Clancy's defense, headed by renowned attorney Kevin Reddington, began its case in chief. Lindsay has been charged with 3 counts of murder in the deaths of her children, 5-year-old Cora, 3-year-old Dawson, and 8-month-old Callan Clancy. This happened on January 24th, 2023 in the Clancy's Duxbury, Massachusetts home. Lindsay used exercise bands to strangle each of her children before attempting to take her own life by taking some crushed up pills, slitting her wrists and throat, and jumping out of a second-story window. She did not die and has since been charged with the murders. Police say her then husband, Patrick Clancy, was running errands at the time. Now, Lindsay's defense has been the same pretty much from the start. She admits, yes, she did kill her kids, but she argues she's not criminally responsible because she wasn't of sound mind at the time. Now, in most states, this is known as the insanity defense, or not guilty by reason of mental defect or disease. In the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, it's criminal responsibility. Lindsay's team says she was suffering a mental break at the time, stemming from postpartum psychosis. And based on the Commonwealth statute, that's true. The entire burden of proof is on the Commonwealth here. Not just the usual, did she do it, burden of proof. No. The Commonwealth must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Lindsay Clancy was criminally responsible because she was of sound mind at the time of the killings. The defense is giving its all to show that Lindsay was not of sound mind at the time. And for that, we've heard from Lindsay's friends, family, medical experts who evaluated her. And let me also say, before any defense witnesses were ever called, Kevin Reddington tried to have the entire case thrown out altogether.
My suggestion to the court is that the evidence that's been presented on this case against Ms. Clancy I would suggest does not rise to the level under Rule 25 of where even if you take the Lattimore standard and determine that the evidence would be decided in the light most favorable to the government at this stage of the case, I think the Brunette-Silvera case places, as they describe it, a negative obligation to prove a negative as part of their case in chief on the government. I suggest to Your Honor that the evidence that has been presented in this case is overwhelming, that this young woman was clearly and unequivocally suffering from a mental disease or defect, that it was occupying her waking hours, her life, that she considered all of her avenues. She attempted to go to these healthcare providers, using the term loosely, that she went to these people. She had medication after medication after medication. She was obviously acting, I suggest to the court, in a state that was observed by witnesses that, in fact, that she was suffering from mental disease or defect, and then ultimately this horrific incident. So under that Burnett-Silvera case, there's no evidence, I suggest, from the government that would rebut the fact that there is evidence of lack of criminal responsibility. So under Burnett-Silvera and the cases that were cited in that opinion, respectfully, I would suggest that a required finding of not guilty should be entered on the case. The matter should be reduced down, if you will, from premeditated malice of forethought, cruelty, and atrocity to second degree. I'm not arguing at this stage Commonwealth versus Gray or any of its progeny as to manslaughter, but I think the court, certainly in its wise exercise of discretion, has the ability and the right to reduce the charge to second degree murder or enter a required finding.
All right, counsel, thank you. Come on.
Reddington made his pitch, but it was ultimately turned down.
Well, I had an opportunity to take a look at Burnett-Silvera. Based on that and based on the standard as described that I have to apply at this point, I'm going to deny the defendant's motion.
With that, the defense began its case in chief, calling on one of Lindsay's close friends and former coworkers at Mass Gen Hospital.
In the years that you were working with her, were you able to observe, I mean, did she like being a nurse? Did she want to work, or was she a good nurse? What's your opinion?
Lindsay loved being a nurse. She was really good at being a nurse. She was compassionate. She was kind. She was a patient advocate. She was the type of nurse that you wanted taking care of you or your loved one when you walked onto our unit.
Did you observe, for example, that on occasion when she would be involved with the delivery of a baby, that she would become emotional?
Lindsay was often emotional during birth of complete strangers. She would cry and she would just say that was so beautiful. You could just tell that she really loved being in that setting.
Hamp testified that Lindsay was very caring for both her patients and her own children.
So Lindsay and I worked the night shift together, and often on the night shift you get to have an opportunity to really get to know your coworkers and celebrate things that are happening in their lives or support them with things that are not going so well. Lindsay asked a lot of questions of her coworkers about parenting. Simple things as she would poll the nursing staff about monogrammed lunch boxes, right down to sleeping habits. What questions do you ask a daycare provider to make sure that you're in the right place? She was often asking her coworkers childcare, parenting tips. Lindsay often checked in on her kids while they were sleeping at night. Again, we worked the night shift, and she had the ability to look at her phone and see what Cora or Callan were doing in their cribs, and she shared that with a lot of us. There was one particular night that Cora was crying. She was probably about 6 months old, and Lindsay never let Cora cry. She wasn't at that point in parenting, and she was very communicative about that. And Cora was crying on the monitor. It was the middle of the night, and maybe after 10 minutes, she started to call Pat, and he wasn't answering. And she got really worried that one, Cora was crying, but now Pat wasn't answering his phone. So in the middle of the night, she called the police to do a wellness check on her family.
This witness also touched on another case, one that Lindsay Clancy's case has drawn a lot of parallels to. That would be the case of Andrea Yates. This happened back in 2001 when Yates, a mother of 5, drowned all of her children in the bathtub of her Houston, Texas home. She was tried twice, the first time in 2002 when she was found guilty of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison. But in 2005, this conviction was overturned. She was retried in 2006 and found not guilty by reason of insanity. And since then, she's been housed at a high-security mental health facility. So for obvious reasons, many people have compared this case to the Andrea Yates case, and it's actually one that Lindsay already knew about.
District Attorney Aston are on Zoloft and expressing issues of being a parent. Were you aware of any incidents where Lindsay was with you and a woman did in fact express concern that she wanted to hurt herself or her child?
There was a particular patient that Lindsay was on staff when this patient arrived. It was a patient that arrived to the unit that had plans to harm herself while she was pregnant. And we had a conversation. Lindsay was brand new. It was the summer that she had just started. And we had a conversation about mental health in pregnancy and postpartum. And I asked her if she had ever heard of the Andrea Yates case, and she hadn't. And I explained that to her, and she cried. And she said, "How could a mother hurt her children?"
Thank you.
The defense's argument is that Lindsay was not of the right mind based on the treatment she received and the mixture of medications she was on. So with that testimony we just played, they attempt to prove Lindsay, in her right mind, would never have killed her children, but prescriptions like Zoloft, which Lindsay was prescribed, can have side effects. And again, it's up to jurors to decide whether they believe that or not, but they will have to consider other testimony, like that of Lindsay's family.
I will say on Thanksgiving in particular is when the first time I saw her in person after quite some time. I had known she had not been doing well via text message communication that we had. I think on Thanksgiving, she, her mood did not look good, her energy, she didn't seem very energized. It definitely seemed off from how I've seen her in the past.
And were you aware that that carried through from November into December, around the holiday season, if you had stayed in touch with her?
Yes.
And can you tell us what you observed about her around the holiday season as it related to her, from your observations and your texting and your communications with Lindsay? How did she appear to you at that point?
The beginning of December, it seemed like she very much decompensated. I do remember her saying at one point at the beginning of December, something along the lines of, "I'm in a really tough spot." And knowing what she had shared with me previously about how her mental health had been struggling, I had this gut feeling that something was off and that she was really struggling, and I asked her if she was safe.
What did she say?
She said yes at that point.
Lindsay's sister testified that her symptoms got worse around Christmas time of 2022.
The end of December, so I think it was more along the same of, that she is really not feeling well. Her mood is down. She's feeling numb. She's feeling hopeless. I believe at the very end of the month, she told me she had had suicidal ideation every day for a month.
Things briefly looked up after Lindsay's stay at McLean Hospital and Cora's birthday party in early January 2023. And then the call that no one expected.
And then, of course, the horrible day. Were you aware, or did somebody call you and tell you that the children had been killed?
Yes.
One of them still survived and ultimately passed.
Yes.
And do you recall who told you that?
Yes.
Who was that?
My mother.
And as a result of getting the call from your mother, what did you do?
I jumped in a car, packed a bag, and I sped up to South Shore Hospital, which is where I was told she was.
The prosecution pushed back on cross, arguing Lindsay's sister never reported that something was off or that the kids could be unsafe.
You are a licensed social worker, correct?
Correct.
And you're a mandated reporter, correct?
Yes.
And at any point in time between January 1st, 2023 and January 24th, 2023, did you have enough concern about the safety of the kids or the safety of your sister to file a report as a mandated reporter?
No.
Lindsay's mom also testified for the defense, saying it was Lindsay's dream to be a mother, but that she saw a shift in Lindsay after the birth of Callan.
I noticed that she was
had become very anxious. She told me she was anxious about going back to work because Callan was having trouble taking a bottle and she didn't feel right about leaving him.
On October 20th, 2022, Lindsay sent her mother this text.
Mom, will you please come up and stay with me for a bit? I'm really sick. Something is wrong. I had horrible insomnia all night, and I just don't know how I'm going to get through the day. I started taking the medicine my doctor prescribed for anxiety, and I think it's made things worse. It's just really scary, and I don't want to be alone.
So as a result of that, did you come up to Duxbury?
Yes, same day.
And tell us about that. What happened that day at the end of October?
Lindsay had been, I believe she went to the emergency room that day, and she had come home. She was feeling a bit better. She told me that she couldn't sleep, she was very anxious, and she was afraid.
And how long did you stay with her?
At that point?
Yes.
I believe at that point I stayed for about a week.
Over the fall of 2022, Lindsay's mom stayed with her frequently, making trips from her home in Connecticut to Duxbury, Massachusetts.
You knew she was on medication at that point?
Yes.
You knew she was seeing doctors at that point?
Yes.
So tell us, is there an incident that came to your mind that you recall that occurred on one evening that indicated to you how seriously she was suffering?
There were many. One particular evening that was disturbing to me was that, she was afraid to be alone, and she actually asked if she could sleep with me.
When was that?
That was late November, early December.
And did she indeed sleep with you on that occasion?
She did.
At that point, Lindsay seemed almost paranoid.
Did she express to you concern that in this time frame that people at the school, teachers and other people would be able to know what she was thinking and would think that she wasn't a good mother because she was sick?
Yes, she said, the school knows something's going on because I'm not driving my car. They see that I'm not driving my car to pick the kids up.
Another highly anticipated witness was called for the defense this week, Susan Clancy.
Yeah, Lindsay married my son Patrick, and we had a very good relationship.
And obviously, you and your husband were the grandparents of the 3 little kids.
Yes.
And how was your relationship with the babies?
Beautiful.
And tell us how frequently, to your memory, you were able to visit with your son, Lindsay, and of course your grandchildren.
At least a couple times a month we would see them.
Sue Clancy essentially gave a glowing review for Lindsay as a mom.
Can you tell the jurors about how you saw her acting with her children as a mother?
She was very nurturing, very loving. She was a wonderful mother. Wonderful.
Did you ever see her treat her middle son, Dawson, bad because you didn't like him?
No.
Did she love Dawson, in your opinion?
She loved her children, all of them, very, very much.
But the pattern continued. Sue Clancy testified she saw changes in Lindsay after Callan's birth, even recommending she see professional Julie Paul.
Did you find that Lindsay was interested at all times in trying to get better and see doctors?
Very much so.
Did you find at all, do you have an opinion with your observations of Lindsay as to whether or not she was offered help and would just spurn it and not see doctors and not have
She was
treatment?
begging for help.
She testified about Lindsay struggling around the holiday season of 2022, and that laid the foundation for the Commonwealth to question about that same time frame on cross-exam.
And do you remember telling the grand jury that during Thanksgiving things were better?
I don't recall.
Well, do you remember her saying that she said things were better? Do you remember that?
Vaguely.
Okay. You were asked, what was Lindsay like during the big Thanksgiving gathering? What observations did you make? Answer, she smiled. The girls all had Thanksgiving t-shirts on that sort of matched. We took a picture. She mostly focused on the kids and interacting with the cousins and the aunts and uncles. At one point, she went off a little into the distance, and I approached and asked her how she was doing, and she said, "I'm trying hard to get better. I'm still working at it." I asked about her sleep. I thought that was important, and also the fact that she lost some weight. She didn't have an appetite, and she said things were getting better.
Okay.
She also testified she had breakfast at the Clancy's Duxbury home on Christmas morning of 2022, and that led to some intense cross-exam.
And then what did you guys do after breakfast?
We went to church.
And fair to say, you've previously testified that breakfast was great
Yes.
and that church was beautiful.
Yes.
And in fact, the defendant, she told you that it was great and that she was glad she went to church that day on Christmas Day.
Yes, she did.
And then after that, you're aware they went down to Connecticut to see her family.
Right.
Now, are you an active member in the Catholic Church?
Yes.
So you're aware that murder is considered a mortal sin?
Counsel, could I see you over here?
After a sidebar, jurors were instructed.
All right, and what that means is you are not to consider it for any reason or any purpose, okay?
On redirect, Sue Clancy testified to Lindsay calling a suicide hotline multiple times, something that's going to come up again later.
She asked you about options that were available to Lindsay, correct?
Yes.
And you mentioned one of them was that she could go to the Women and Infants program in Rhode Island that specializes in perinatal and postpartum, right?
Yes.
You know that she went there, right?
Correct.
You know she was turned away because she was over-medicated, right?
Yes.
You also know that they gave her numbers to call suicide hotlines, right?
Yes.
She called twice, not once, but twice, and again was turned away. Isn't that right?
Yes.
And this leads into the medical testimony. The defense called an emergency medicine doctor who actually treated Lindsay after her suicide attempt. His testimony went to undermine the prosecution's potential theory that Lindsay didn't really want to go through with this suicide attempt.
Now, in your experience for a number of years in the emergency room, have you had occasion to treat people that have tried to commit suicide or successfully committed suicide by cutting their throat?
Multiple times.
Multiple times. And can you tell us, in your opinion, to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, sir, as to whether or not this injury or these injuries that you observed were consistent with what you've seen in other suicide attempts?
Sustained.
Well, can you tell us, did that look like an effort to pretend or fake a suicide?
Sustained.
Well, when you looked at the injuries, did you make a determination that they appeared to have some impact on the human body of Ms. Clancy?
Yes.
What was that?
They were consistent with self-injurious behavior. The intent, I can't gauge, but...
He testified Lindsay showed no signs of hesitation wounds.
How about the wrist? What did you observe about the wrist injuries, sir?
So she had 2 full-thickness lacerations, one on the left, one on the right.
What does that mean?
Means that she made it all the way through the epidermis and the dermis, which is what makes up the skin in the wrist, and into the fatty tissue, which is the next layer.
Okay. Are you familiar in your experience, sir, with hesitation wounds in a suicide attempt?
Yes, to some extent.
What does that mean?
Means typically that they're more kind of subtle, weaker attempts to hurt yourself, not necessarily anything that's going to be deep to the structures of the skin, but more just scrapes along the surface.
Okay, and you noticed some of those on the neck area as well, is that correct?
There were multiple of those on both the neck and the wrists.
As it relates to the injuries to the wrists, did you observe any vascular structures or penetration of the cervical, the fascia?
There was not.
Okay.
The defense used testimony from forensic doctor Donald Condy to follow up on Lindsay's medication use. He spoke about the possible side effects of what she was prescribed.
Well, Zoloft is a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, which is a type of antidepressant that started being used around 1988, I believe. Prozac was the first one, Zoloft was the second. When it works to be helpful, it combats both anxiety and depressive symptoms that people might have. It also has, in some people, an effect of causing a feeling of jitteriness and increasing anxiety. So it's something that does have some potential side effects as well as beneficial effects.
Dr. Condi testified it takes a while for antidepressants to kick in on users, but that the side effects can come on rapidly. He also testified about the possibility that Lindsay has bipolar disorder, something that the defense has maintained from day one.
In reference to the bipolar disorder that we touched upon, sir, is that something that's a consideration when you're treating, as a psychiatrist, a woman who's coming to you for help and expressing concerns about the symptoms that we've talked about?
Yes.
Why?
Well, some people with bipolar disorder, especially given the fact that depression is a prominent symptom in bipolar disorder, become suicidal and can even commit suicide. So that's a very serious possibility that has to be considered.
Did any of the nurse practitioners consider that as a possible diagnosis?
The records indicate that Ms. Clancy was frequently asked if she had a plan to kill herself, even after she reported having what was called passive suicidal ideation. But it was reported very, very frequently in the records.
And here's where I have to refer to some statistics. I've been throwing out the stats that 1 in 4 women experience postpartum depression and 1 in 1,000 experience postpartum psychosis. And that is true with a caveat. A viewer wrote in to me and suggested that those stats go way up if the mother was previously diagnosed with bipolar disorder. So I looked it up. According to the National Institute of Health, if a woman has pre-existing bipolar disorder, her chances of experiencing postpartum psychosis are increased by up to 200%. Again, this is straight from the National Institute of Health. It's their statistic. And that means if Lindsay has bipolar disorder, she was at an extra risk of experiencing postpartum depression and psychosis. Dr. Condi suggests that some of Lindsay's actions after the birth of Callan Clancy show she was experiencing bipolar disorder.
There was talk in the records of an episode where Ms. Clancy and her husband cleaned out the garage, but it was difficult to tell from the records whether or not that represented what we would call a hypomanic episode.
Exercise. Was there a lot of references to exercise?
There were a lot of references to exercise, and exercise can be a very useful thing.
Sure, that's one of the things that a woman postpartum may very well be prescribed to do by a doctor like, or a nurse practitioner like Gillespe, right?
I believe that nurse practitioner Julie Paul recommended a long run at one point.
So there's nothing wrong with a woman going to, let's say, Kingsbury or whatever it is, or taking her kids to the local gym with a swimming pool and trying to get some exercise in the postpartum stage. That doesn't, that's something you wouldn't hold against her, right?
No.
Okay. Now, how about, are you aware that within a very short period of time after she had baby Callan, that she actually ran a road race?
Yes.
Is that indicative of a person that's kind of ramped up and doing these things you're talking about?
It's unusual to decide to run so soon after delivering a baby. I believe that she ran on the day that she might have delivered her last child, Callan.
That's correct.
This next part is really important. The Commonwealth asked Dr. Condi about possible auditory hallucinations.
And as far as your conversations about hallucinations and auditory hallucinations, you indicated that at some point, or at points, I think was your testimony, that the defendant did hear a voice. But you're aware that she never reported to Jennifer Tufts that she heard a voice?
She did not.
She never reported to Rebecca Gelada that she heard a voice, did she?
She did not.
She never reported to Letitia Dukes that she heard a voice?
She did not.
And the only time she's ever said that she heard this voice was on January 24th of 2023. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
The Commonwealth is arguing Lindsay never reported hearing voices until after the kids were killed, but the defense came with an explanation.
So when the district attorney asks you whether or not Lindsay, after all the symptoms that we've already gone through, told Rebecca Gelada that she heard a voice, told Dr. Tufts that she heard a voice, and denied that she heard a voice, would you agree that there are reasons that a woman would not tell the doctor or minimize their symptoms out of fear?
Yes.
What kind of fear? Fear of what?
Well, in the records, it's stated that Ms. Clancy reported she was worried that her children would be taken away from her, perhaps by the Department of Children and Families, if she reported very severe symptoms. The other thing is, as a health care professional, boards of registration sometimes take a dim view of people who have been in treatment for certain psychiatric illnesses. And so she might have been concerned about her nursing license, but that's speculation.
So there are other reasons why a person may be concerned about telling healthcare providers, mandated reporters, that they're hearing voices, correct?
Yes.
Would you agree with me that you don't have to see the proverbial unicorn in the corner to your health provider to be suffering from psychosis?
Yes, that's true.
The next defense witness was Dr. Elizabeth Laposada, who testified Lindsay did not fake her suicide attempt and that the autopsy photos of the children shown to jurors were worse than their actual injuries. But it was her testimony on cross-exam that really stood out to me.
So hitting the frozen ground, the icy frozen ground, not a bump or scratch or scrape on her top of her head, and then within her head, there was no brain bleed, there was no hemorrhaging, there was no injury into her brain itself. Nothing showed up on the CT scans, correct?
Correct. Her brain was fine. Her skull was fine. I'm sure she probably had some scalp bruising under her hair.
You're sure because that goes along with what you're guessing at, how the fall happened, correct? You can't be sure because you didn't see the head, correct? You say you're sure, but you didn't see her head.
I saw the medical records and I examined all of those. I'm sure she had some bruise on the top of her head to the backside, as I showed in my diagram number 4. I'm sure there was some bruising on her scalp under her hair, but that was not a major concern at the time she was taken into the hospital.
You keep saying you're sure there were bruises, that you're sure that there was this or that that's not shown in any photographs or medical evidence. So you're not sure, are you? You're assuming.
No, I'm sure.
Okay. Let me show you some photographs here.
Excuse me. No,
No,
yes.
and let me show you, I'm asking the questions. Let me show you some photographs
okay, go
here.
ahead.
Let me show you some photographs of the defendant that were taken at the hospital of her head. Show me. Do we have sharing privileges on the computer?
Whatever you want, we'll do it.
Showing you here a photo of the top of the defendant's head. No
Yes, I see that.
cuts, no swelling, correct?
We just see her hair.
There's no blood on the white sheet, correct?
Well, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you just asked me.
There's no blood on that very white sheet, correct?
Well, I don't see what's under her head, but that's not relevant to understanding that she did fall head first.
Okay, so you're saying she fell head first from 13 feet onto hard frozen ground and had no visible injuries to the exterior of her head?
Yes.
And you're saying that she...
Excuse me, I'm
It was
sure
a yes
there
or no
was some
question,
bruise.
doctor.
Listen, hold on. Doctor, listen to the question, answer the question, and then we'll just go from there. Go ahead. Ms. Sprague, if you want, Ms. Sprague, if you want to re-ask that question.
Doctor, yes or no, she fell to the ground, frozen ground, and then had no apparent injury to the exterior of her head, correct?
Correct.
The Commonwealth pushes Dr. Laposada on how long it would take to strangle someone with a ligature in terms of minutes. And it gets so tense that at one point, Lindsay even starts crying. Later, ADA Jen Sprague demonstrates with actual exercise bands from an evidence bag.
Going child's neck several times and then left there. I guess you can't see it from where you are, but it just fell
Well,
apart. It didn't
I
stay
could-
in a circle.
Yeah, I sort of saw what you did, so
What was that?
I said, I saw that.
You saw it. So it was left there and it fell apart, correct?
Yeah, what you just did, sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. All right, thank you, doctor.
You saw the exercise band there. It's some pretty crucial evidence in this trial. And this is just one of those cases where everyone wants to take a deep dive into all the evidence we have. And now you can. For behind every major scandal is a paper trail the public rarely gets to see. If you haven't heard yet, you can go beyond the headlines with case files on the Law&Crime Plus app. This is where you get direct access to the raw evidence, uncensored body camera recordings, crime scene images, video recordings of interrogations, and so much more. You can analyze the facts and uncover the truth for yourself. Plus, you get ad-free streaming of all of your favorite law and crime and court TV shows. Unlock the evidence room today. Head over to lawandcrimeplus.com, enter promo code SCANDAL, and start your 30-day free trial. Now, a major piece of evidence we've been talking about this entire case is Lindsay's medical records. We heard from Commonwealth witnesses who had treated her, but this week we heard from a defense witness, Dr. Paul Zeisel, who's seen Lindsay about 45 times since January of 2023. He was actually there when Lindsay made her first call to Patrick after killing her kids.
The conversation I had with Ms. Clancy at that time was one where I asked if she knew where she was. So I did what's called a mental status exam, a brief mental status exam. It's orientation to time, place, location. She didn't know where she was, wasn't quite sure what time it was. She knew who she was. And she told me that she remembers what happened, but it was very fuzzy and foggy. At the time, she had been on medication for the significant pain post-surgery while in that hospital room.
And during the course of that interview with her, did she express any concern to you about her husband, Patrick?
Yes, she did.
Tell the jurors what she indicated to you.
She said, since 11 days prior to my meeting with her, which would have been January 24th, 2023, she had no contact with Patrick. She wanted to know how he was doing. She wanted to know if she could call him and find out where things are with her and with him and how he was faring, and to just speak with him.
She expressed concern about her family.
Yes, she did.
Did she express concern about what had happened?
Yes.
Did she ask you, or did you offer to her the ability to speak to her husband, Patrick?
She asked me if she could use my cell phone to call her husband.
Did she do that?
Yes, she did.
Did you hear the conversation?
Yes, I told her we'd call. It would have to be on speakerphone.
And tell us about that conversation.
So that first phone call, I believe on the 24th, he did not pick up. She left a message. I did not leave a message. We then called back 2 days later on the 6th.
And after the 2 days had transpired and the call was made on the 6th, did she have a chance to talk to Patrick?
Yes.
Were you there?
Yes. She had told Patrick that she loved him very much. She was unable to express a lot of emotion, but she expressed love for him. And she had said that she heard a male voice ordering her, telling her that she didn't have any choice, but she had to kill her children and then kill herself.
Now, doctor, have in mind your background, your career, Did you tell Lindsay Clancy to lie or make that up and pretend that she was hearing voices?
No.
Did you have any conversation or any suggestions to her at all that she should say she heard voices or anything like that?
Absolutely not.
Why did you let her call her husband on your cell phone?
I let her call her husband out of human compassion.
This next piece of testimony is objected to and eventually withdrawn, but listen to what Dr. Zeisel starts to say.
Why would you see her in the lockup?
I would see Lindsay Clancy in lockup because the nature of presentation in this court has been gut-wrenching for anyone who would be exposed to such horrific
Objection and move to strike. It's not responsive to the question.
Can I see counsel over here?
I'll withdraw it. Let me
All right, so that answer, ladies and gentlemen, that answer is stricken.
He called this case gut-wrenching and horrific, and this next piece of testimony is just that.
Now, as that time went on into the period of Thanksgiving up to around Christmas, did she continue to reach out to people for help, such as suicide hotlines?
Yes, she reached out to.
The answer is yes.
Yes.
Why did she call a suicide hotline?
She was worried about killing herself.
And did she get any help from the suicide hotline?
She was turned away.
How about the second time she called the suicide hotline?
She was turned away.
How about when she went to the Women and Infants program in Rhode Island?
They told her she was not a good fit for the program.
Why?
Because she was overly medicated.
And did she continue to seek help from healthcare providers?
Yes.
The defense expert testified that Lindsay tried to get help but was turned away multiple times. And while she didn't report hearing voices, she reported on other concerning things.
She felt that her brain was damaged. She felt that she should kill herself. And she's never going to get any better.
Did she also express fear that people could hear her thoughts and that anything adverse would happen in her life regarding being a mother and having children?
Yes, that's called thought broadcasting.
And what was her concern about the children?
Her concern was that when people could hear her thoughts, her children would be removed from her care.
Bottom line, Dr. Zeisel testified he believes Lindsay was not in her right mind at the time of the killings.
My opinion is that she did have indeed a mental disease or a defect. That's a legal construct, not a DSM-5 one, but she had bipolar disorder with postpartum psychoses. In addition, she was unable to conform her behaviors to the rule of law, and she had no appreciation for the wrongfulness of her act.
On cross, the Commonwealth pointed to multiple reports from the hospital that Lindsay was of sound mind and acting appropriately. They even suggested that Dr. Zeisel may have possible confirmation bias.
Given that she's my patient, yes, I wrote she was my patient. That's correct.
And you're aware of, again, the APA guidelines on forensic psychology, where it warns therapeutic forensic role conflicts. Providing forensic and therapeutic psychological services to the same individual involves multiple relationships that may impair objectivity and or cause exploitation or other harm. You're aware of that, section 4.02?
Yes.
And in this particular case, since the beginning, you've appeared regularly in court hearings, right?
Yes.
You've appeared with Attorney Reddington at arraignment proceedings,
At his request, yes.
both here and at Tewksbury State Hospital, where you were sitting next to the defendant.
Yes.
And you're aware of the danger of this idea of confirmation bias of having multiple relationships and conflicts in this type of work, correct?
Yes.
And that's why it's important not to be treating somebody as a patient when you're also evaluating them for this type of legal issue, right?
Of course, you cannot be the therapist and the examiner. The therapist is an advocate. The examiner looks for the truth.
On redirect, jurors heard for the first time what Lindsay's life is like now, how she reacts to what she's done.
I didn't hear that she's laughing and partying and having a good time while she's in the Tewksbury Hospital. Did you see anything like that?
No, Lindsay Clancy has bad days and worse days.
And when you speak with her and meet with her, doctor, has she ever mentioned her children? Because apparently, according to the questioning that you underwent, she never talks about her kids.
She does speak about her children.
What does she say?
She really loves them and misses them and thinks of them every single day, almost every moment of the day.
We were all waiting with bated breath for the case in chief that the defense had to bring, and they're for sure bringing it. But has it been everything that we expected? Are they doing a good job? Who's the best witness for their argument? These are all questions I'm going to ask today's guest. It's friend of the show and criminal defense attorney Will Corman, out of Massachusetts, by the way. Will, it's great to see you. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me again.
Okay, so for our viewers, we're recording this morning. It's Thursday morning. This video is going to premiere later today, so we don't know exactly what happened so far on Thursday. But so far, at the time of this recording, are you impressed or unimpressed with the case in chief from the defense?
I think Kevin Reddington, honestly, one of the greatest lawyers out there, and he's doing, it's almost a master class in how to put on a case like this.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I mean, it's so interesting to watch him. He's very calculated. He is thinking 10 steps ahead, almost like a game of chess. I feel like he definitely knows what he's doing. And at the very start, before he even called any witnesses, he tried to have the case completely thrown out. He's kind of said this from the beginning. You know, my client doesn't deserve to be charged with murder, hoping to have it thrown away. Is this something that normally happens?
Sure. So at the end of in every criminal case, when the prosecution rests, the defense attorney has to ask for a motion for a required finding or a motion for a directed verdict. And it almost doesn't matter how strong the government's case is or not. But for appellate purposes, if you don't ask for that at the end of the government's case, the burden gets much harder on appeal. So it's one of those things that you scribble down in your notebook, your first year of law school, and it's just drilled into you over and over again that when the government rests, when they call their final witness, you have to ask for that. It doesn't mean that you really think it's going to happen. Sometimes it means you hope it's going to happen, but you have to do it every time, and it's almost always for appellate purposes.
Okay, that makes sense. I know a lot of people are drawn to this case and they may be first-time trial watchers, so they've never seen this before. They're not attorneys and unfamiliar with something like that. So it makes sense that he was doing that for the potential appeal of all of that.
Correct.
But eventually he does go, he calls his witnesses. And I'm going to ask you, who do you think is the best witness we've seen so far in terms of testimony?
Dr. Zeisel, hands down. Hands down.
Okay.
He did a great job explaining methodically what he did and the conclusions he got to. He got out of the way, and Attorney Reddington got out of the way the fact that, you know, they've worked together in the past and they have a relationship. Honestly, watching the two of them with their questions and answers, you could show that video to law students. It was perfect, and Dr. Zeisel did a great job both on direct with Attorney Reddington and a wonderful job when he was cross-examined by the prosecutor.
You know, in his testimony, there were many things that stood out because he was on the stand for a while. They really covered a lot of information because he obviously has observed Lindsay. He's gone through, you know, her medical records and all the paperwork, all of that. But something that I cannot stop thinking about is him testifying to her calling the suicide hotline multiple times and essentially being turned away, saying, okay, well, you don't have a plan, so you're not going to carry it through. Okay, kind of good to go. Like, talking about that, talking about how he believes definitively she was not in the right mind at the time. And postpartum psychosis, I feel like this is something that is underlying throughout this entire trial. But is that something that's really important for the jurors to understand? Because it can be kind of complex.
Sure. I mean, any mental health defense is complex, but I think Dr. Zeisel did a great job explaining exactly how the system failed Lindsay Clancy. And who are we kidding? Regardless of how you feel about this case, the system failed her.
I know. I mean, it's so hard as somebody who has her own mental health struggles. I know a lot of people watching do, some jurors might even. I mean, we look at this and think, okay, if we need help and we're reaching out, we should have help, right? And we saw time and time again where she was prescribed prescription after prescription. She saw multiple different doctors. She was institutionalized at one point. And to see all of that and still the outcome of this case, it's heartbreaking at the very least. But I want to talk about the cross here too, because the prosecution is bringing it in terms of cross. It's interesting to see their differences between direct and on cross. And Dr. Zeisel's cross, they basically were saying, okay, is it possible you have confirmation bias here? Like, you want to see the psychosis, so you are. So can you talk about the cross of it?
Sure. I think the prosecutors did a fine job at cross-examining Dr. Zeisel. His responses show just how professional he is. Even so much as, he was asked a question both on cross and direct, and then would turn and look at the jury to give his answer. This is a gentleman who knows what he's doing. This is a polished expert witness, but on the same hand, he doesn't come across as stuffy or, too uptight as a witness. So I understand why the prosecution was going the way they were about confirmation bias. I think it's almost all they had to go on. So I'm not surprised at the direction they went, and I think he fended those off very well.
I tend to agree with you in terms of how he presents. I do remember him looking at the jury, talking directly to them, because honestly, sometimes when I'm watching these cases and we have like a medical expert, I did not go to med school. I'm not a doctor. So some of the terms that they use or descriptions go over my head. I truly don't know what they mean. And I feel like Kevin Reddington and Dr. Zeisel specifically do a good job of saying, okay, here's this long term, whatever it may be. Let's dumb it down, for lack of a better term. So lay people like myself, Sierra, and the jurors can understand what's going on. And I think he did a really good job of that, because some of the stuff here is really complex, as we talked about. And I think they did a good job of making it understandable. Another defense witness I want to talk about too is Susan Clancy. This is Patrick Clancy's mother, now Lindsay's ex-mother-in-law. What did you think about her testifying for the defense?
I thought it was great. I thought it's very important. Almost regardless of what her testimony could be, I think it's important to show that she's willing to testify on behalf of Lindsay Clancy. I think that from a strategic standpoint, I thought calling her as a witness was smart. Again, it almost wouldn't matter what she said. Obviously, if she was going to testify that she thinks Lindsay is horrible and so on and so forth, you would have known that ahead of time and not called her. But barring that, any other reason to call her was a brilliant tactical move. I think the direct was good, it was calm, and I know you're going to ask me about the cross-examination, and candidly, I just don't understand it.
I mean, okay, so the direct, yes, I thought that it was a great move by them for Sue to get up there and say Lindsay was a great mom. I believe her quote was, she's begging for help. She was begging for help. But you're right, I gotta ask about the cross, because there were a few things that stood out to me. We've got the conversations that Lindsay had with her therapist, basically asking Sue, did you know that she was like not that into you? Did you know she didn't want to leave the kids with you? Let's ask about that part first. Do you have any indication of why they talked about that?
I think that I think the prosecution has their job, obviously, is to show that Lindsay Clancy knew what she was doing from beginning to end. And this was a planned, calculated, horrific scenario. And I think that when they were trying to maybe rile up Sue Clancy a little bit, maybe get her to at least spin in a negative way something about Lindsay, it didn't work. But I think that's why they were asking questions in that particular manner and asking those particular questions, trying to drive some sort of wedge between Sue and Lindsay.
Okay, it makes sense. I mean, the prosecutors are trying to do their job. They're trying to get testimony out of these defense witnesses that could help their case to prove that she's criminally responsible. That's their whole goal here, right? But something I really didn't expect was when they asked, you're a practicing Catholic, whatever it may be, are you aware that murder is a mortal sin? Immediately there's a sidebar right there. What do you think went on in that sidebar?
I mean, we're always guessing what happens at sidebars.
Right.
I certainly haven't followed this trial as closely as you, but I don't know what that question was all about. I don't know what the purpose of that question was. I can't imagine why they asked that question. It makes no sense. It was guaranteed to draw either an objection from Attorney Reddington or even the judge on his own. And I think at the sidebar, the judge probably said something along the lines of, I don't know why you're asking that. It's an absolute improper question. I'm going to strike it and you need to move on. But again, I don't know what that question was for.
I mean, that question has people talking because it's not something we generally see in a courtroom. It's kind of a mic drop moment in a courtroom. And I do have to wonder, I mean, the judge says, okay, this is stricken. Jurors, please ignore this question, kind of delete it from your mind. But sometimes I feel like if this is me and I'm told not to think about it, I'm going to keep thinking about it. Like they're instructed, don't focus on this. But I guess in terms of jurors, we never know exactly what they're thinking, right? Or what's going on in the deliberation room. But how does that work? They're told not to think about this, but maybe they still are. I mean, do you have any insight into that?
Well, unfortunately, the system isn't perfect, right? And we ask jurors not to consider a lot of things. So this is just one of a number of questions where an objection was raised and sustained, and then the judge has to inform the jurors at the beginning of the trial, if I sustain an objection, you are not to consider the question or the answer in the jury room. It happens in every single trial, and we ask a lot of jurors. We ask them to not focus on things that they're not supposed to hear. Now, this is sort of an unusual one because, again, despite having done criminal defense for almost 30 years, I don't know what the purpose of that question was. I don't quite get it. But having said that, we ask jurors to do that all the time. Things happen, and courts are fluid. Trials are fluid. They're dynamic, and things change all the time. And we often ask jurors to put something out of their mind, to not consider something. Sometimes there's whole witnesses who testify partially, and a judge, for some reason, throws that witness out and says you can't consider anything that witness said. So, do jurors think about it? I have faith in the system, so I'm not quite sure how to answer that, but it's hard. The phrase is, it's hard to unring a bell.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I do think that the jurors are taking their job seriously. When I've been there in the courtroom, I've seen them paying attention to the witness, paying attention to the questions, writing in their notebook, being kind of, paying attention at the very least. So I do think they're taking their job seriously. It's just something I'm starting to think about as we get closer to deliberations, because what is that going to look like? And something that I'm wondering if they're going to talk about is the hearing voices, because while this was in the prosecution, the Commonwealth's case in chief, they asked witness after witness, did Lindsay Clancy ever say that she heard voices to a lot of the medical professionals? Did she ever seen that she was undergoing psychosis at the time? And oftentimes they said, no, she never mentioned voices, nothing like that. Now on defense, Kevin Reddington has had, Dr. Zeisel, for example, or a couple of others who say maybe she was nervous coming forward saying, hey, I hear voices. She knows that that's wrong, quote unquote. Something's wrong here. Mm-hmm. And she might lose her kids. She might, she might have been undergoing psychosis, but could still present as she wasn't. I mean, so it's kind of hard. It kind of cuts both ways. Who do you think is winning, so to speak, in that argument?
So, as you aptly said, right? Individuals with various degrees of mental illness, even psychosis, can still function in society like normal folks. And we don't know what's going on between the ears of just about anybody. So as far as who's winning that argument, again, Dr. Zeisel did a great job explaining what he knows and why he knows it. I think that the government, in their closing argument, is going to repeatedly mention the fact that this doctor was asked whether or not Lindsay Clancy heard voices. They said no. This doctor was asked. They said no. All these doctors on the prosecution side were asked this very important question. But just because somebody is or isn't hearing voices, obviously that's not the standard. If you hear voices, therefore you are in some sort of psychosis, but if you don't, you're not. I mean, that makes no sense. But obviously Lindsay has told Dr. Zeisel that she was hearing these voices, and these voices were telling her to do some horrific things. And why would you say that as soon as you got to the hospital? Again, you're right. Maybe if the goal is to keep your kids and to keep your kids safe, I don't necessarily know that you want to tell a doctor immediately something that you think may result in your kids being taken away.
Yeah, I mean, it's compelling that one of the first things that she did at the hospital was ask for an attorney, ask to change her proxy. She finally mentioned psychosis to Patrick. He testified he only ever heard of it after the children were already killed. And same with the hearing voices. So that's kind of a win, so to speak, for the Commonwealth. But then, to your point, why would she mention all of this if she was nervous about having her kids taken away? I think the defense did a good job of countering it. And all of this kind of hinders on the criminal responsibility, right? Because just to remind everyone, regardless of the TikToks that are out there or Instagrams, Lindsay Clancy has admitted that she killed her kids, but she says she's not criminally responsible because she was having a psychotic break, undergoing postpartum psychosis at the time. So the burden here is on the Commonwealth to prove that she was criminally responsible. And you're out of Massachusetts. I read this statute multiple times, and it's confusing for me. I'm sure it's confusing for jurors. Can you kind of explain explain what they're going to have to determine in terms of criminal responsibility?
Sure, and it's confusing for lawyers too, so let's be fair. I mean, the fact of the matter is this, is the government, Kevin Reddington has put forward a defense that says, my client admits to doing this. Guilt or innocence as to the actual underlying events is not the question. The question is was she essentially mentally sound at the time this happened? And we are saying she was not. So it's what's called an affirmative defense, and that changes it. So normally the government has to prove whether or not somebody is guilty or innocent. The government needs to prove whether or not someone is guilty. Did they commit the crime? Here, again, as you said, regardless of what's been thrown out there on TikTok and other social media, Lindsay Clancy has admitted that she committed this crime. The government now needs to, in order to rebut what the defense has put out there, they need to show that she was sane at the time this happened, that this was something she did purposefully, that the murder of these poor children was something she did willingly and knowingly. And it's the defense's burden to show, no, she wasn't in her right mind. There were things going on. She had psychosis. She was insane at the time that she did this. And that's the difference in this sort of case. Whether or not she killed the kids is something she's admitted to. It's horrible, it's tragic, but she has said, I did it. And the question now is just simply whether or not she was so impacted by some mental health issues, some mental health trauma, that she isn't responsible for her own actions.
It really comes down to Lindsay Clancy's mental status at the moment that each of the children were killed. And that's, I mean, we've heard a lot of testimony. We've got a lot of information. The jurors have a lot to sift through. I'm wondering if the Commonwealth has met their burden here, what way the jury is going to go. I know I'm going to be watching. I know you will be too. Will Corman, thank you for coming on Scandal. We'd love to have you back on for more insight.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to continue to follow this case and bring you all of the latest updates right here on Scandal. And for complete live coverage of this case, make sure to tune into Law&Crime, where we're streaming this with gavel-to-gavel coverage. And that is where today's episode of Scandal leaves us for now. If you like what you saw and you want to see more, or connect with me on places like Instagram, you can find me at Sierra Gillespe. Thanks for watching today's episode of Scandal. As always, I'm your host, Sierra Gillespe, and I'll see you next time.